Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. We're just a couple of nerdy veterans geeking out over our scientific passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, I'm going to address the elephant in the room. Yes, I did not list the chaos coordinator, Miss Stabby McStabberson, today because she is sending me pictures of all the delicious food she's made, and she hasn't sent me any, so phooey on her. All right, Nick, get that in order, right? We want food. Anyway, my co-host's wife is one of our other co-hosts, and she's been bombarding me with all the steaks she's cooking and not sending me any. It's just rude. I mean, that ought to be criminal.
It should.
Yeah. So how do you take your steak, since we're going food? I don't know why we always start with the grill, but
I'm a medium guy. I know you can get jumped on for that, but I like it a little less red, a little more pink.
Yeah, same here. That medium well are the two that I like. I don't want it to be leather, but I don't want it to be mooing either.
Right. Yeah, exactly. not too much blood in the plate, please.
Right. So do you do the grilling out there in San Diego?
I do. I am my wife's favorite cook, so I do all the cooking around here.
Nice. Do you have a favorite cut for your steaks?
I like the ribeye. It's got that balance of price point and flavor. So
yeah.
You're not blowing your wad on a fillet, and you're not having to chew through something tougher like a fatty sirloin or something. I like a good ribeye.
Yeah, that's one of the things I'm teaching myself, the grill. I figure you get a certain point in your life as a guy, you just have to learn how to man a grill. It's like required. It's in the manual or something.
Exactly.
So I've been teaching myself that one. Right now I've been doing lots of burgers, dogs, brats, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I got to sell a few more books so I can start learning the steaks, because those are expensive these days.
Yeah, it's all in the timing. So if you get if you learn 4 minutes aside and then you trust it, you get the grill to the right temperature, and then you just watch the clock, you're gonna pretty much nail it almost every time. It's almost nice. Without fail. So that's the secret.
Are you a gas grill or charcoal?
I've got a gas here. Yeah,
I've got a gas right now, but at some point in time I'd like to, when I get a bigger yard, go full charcoal. Maybe even build one of those fire pits in the back that I drool over when Lowe's sends me those magazines.
That'd be nice. You get one of those, or one of those pellet ones where you can put like mesquite or one of the other.
Like
smoker, but you get some nice flavor to the bricks when you're cooking them. Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, that's the dream. All right, so since we got led astray because we were lamenting the fact that Stabby didn't send any of the steaks our way, Steven, can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Steven D Nickell. I am a recently first-time published author. My book just came out on April 4th. But I have been at this a while. I actually come from the movie business, where I wrote screenplays, produced, low-budget independent films. Nothing sexy, nothing in Hollywood or anything, just the local San Diego film scene. But I did that for a lot of years, and then opportunity came along to write novels, and I took it. So that's what I'm doing.
All right. So for the second part of the introduction, dear listener, is how we found him. So he was actually recommended to us by a friend of the show. So from there, we just made things happen. And steampunk is kind of cool. I dig the outfit. So, when they said you were writing some steampunk books, we had to make it happen. Is the aesthetic what got you into steampunk? Is that what sort of drew you in?
No. Well, yeah, kind of. More the technology than the fashion. Because the book is not like straight steampunk. It's steampunk adjacent. It has a lot of the gear, the tech, but the timeline isn't so much Victorian as it is like Napoleonic. It's a much more Dickensian inspired, Charles Dickens. So it's kind of all over the place. I just didn't feel like being constrained, or didn't want to overly fetishize like the Victorian thing too much. So I'm kind of all over the place.
For me, it started. Are you familiar with the Skyrim franchise?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So the Dwemer in Skyrim, which was I keep wanting to say they were dwarves, but according to the wikis, they were an elven race. But either way, in the game world, they were long forgotten, but they left like in their ruins. It was all like clockwork and gears and brass and all that, and it was so cool that I started looking, because I don't think there are any novels set in the Skyrim world, but I do enjoy the lore. So I started looking for something similar to it, and that's how I sort of stumbled onto steampunk.
Yeah.
And I dig the aesthetic, and so it's, for me, it started with like the automaton brass gear robots and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, there was a video game, and I'm gonna struggle with the name of it because it's flipped from way back. It's oh my god, it's one of those RPGs from long ago. But there was a great RPG that was very steampunk, and that was kind of the first time I was really aware of the genre, the subgenre of fantasy, if you will.
All right, so what makes you list your book as Gaslamp instead of steampunk?
Yeah, that's weird, right? I had never heard of that until I started digging into the guts of the Amazon backend, getting ready to list my book, and they had steampunk, and I was like, all right, well, yeah, fine, but what else do I call it? It's not really historical fiction, even though it's heavily inspired by the Napoleonic era. It's not historical fiction. Like, what else do I call it? It's not high fantasy or any epic fantasy or anything like that. So they had this subgenre just sitting there called Gaslamp fantasy, and I'm like, yeah, I got gas lamps, so that's how I chose it.
It's a good way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get too deep in this interview, because we do have to do this, but the religion questions, are you ready for this, sir?
I am ready. Go ahead.
All right. Star Wars, Star Trek, or Firefly?
Star Trek. Longtime Trekkie.
What is it about the Trek universe that speaks to you?
I don't know. I like the way the universe is constructed. It makes sense to me in my head. Humanity pushing out into the stars. The world building of it. I was 6. Well, I was born the year Star Trek aired, so that I just outed myself. And it's been with me my whole life. I was a Next Generation fan, but I was a really big fan of Deep Space Nine. That ended up being my favorite series of all of them, and I just really bonded with it.
Okay, that's a good reason. Now, did you have any other like near and dear to your heart sci-fi franchises, or were you a one-trick pony in that one?
No, I like Battlestar Galactica, old and new. I was a Buck Rogers guy, huge Aaron Gray fan when I was a kid. Sorry, Aaron. If there's a good X-Files, I was a passionate X-Files fan. Didn't watch some of the other, didn't watch any Stargate, although I saw the original movie. Haven't seen Babylon 5 or anything. I loved Westworld, that show on HBO. So I do love my science fiction. Oh, and The Expanse. I would say probably one of my top 5 favorite shows is The Expanse.
Yeah. That started coming out right when we cut cable. So I have only seen like half of season 1, and I've been meaning to go back to it, but at some point.
Yeah, it's outstanding.
Okay. So what about, okay. So because we are polytheistic, we got to move on and cover some of the others genres. So Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, or Chronicles of Narnia?
I'm going to go Chronicles of Narnia. Haven't read any Wheel of Time. I know. Did read the first Game of Thrones. It wasn't my jam. Watched the first season of the show. Again, wasn't my jam. So yeah, I'm going to say a little bit cozier with the Chronicles of Narnia.
Okay. Nothing wrong with that. For the Chronicles of Narnia, have you watched it or watched it? Have you read it since you've grown up, or was that something you just read as a kid?
That was a kid. Yeah, that was a kid thing. I don't even know if I could, except for the fact that I saw the movies. What was it? What are we talking? 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't even be able to tell you the plots anymore because I read them when I was in middle school, I think. But those are the ones I really loved. As I got older, I started reading, the Dearney by Catherine Kurtz, the Dearney series. I was Thomas Covenant fan for a minute there. So there's a lot more fantasy series that I've read since, but of the three you mentioned, Narnia would be the one that I bonded with.
So if you didn't have to constrain yourself by the list, what would be your favorite franchise of fantasy?
Of fantasy? Gosh. I would say right now, I just started reading. All right, so let me give you the one I've read all the way through, which is probably Naomi Novik's Temeraire series. It's very much in my wheelhouse as far as it's kind of steampunk adjacent, Napoleonic era adjacent. Well, it is Napoleonic. So I would say that. Although I am rapidly falling in love with the Gentleman Bastard series by Scott Lynch. Like I mentioned to you in the pre-show. Just finished Lies of Locke Lamora, which I adore and can't wait to read the rest of. So I have a feeling that will be the new number one.
Okay. What are the themes that you think you resonate with the most? Is there any overarching themes that you like in your speculative fiction, or is it series dependent?
Yeah, it's really series dependent. I don't really bond necessarily with themes. For me, it's all characters. If the characters are memorable, if I like good prose, so if it's well written, it's one of the reasons why I've struggled with some more popular authors, just because it's not a pleasure to read for me. It's kind of a conceit that I have. I like a good use of prose. So, and I found Scott Lynch's prose to be sublime. So, so I think that it's very character and prose dependent.
For some people, like, I want dragons or mechs or tanks or whatever. Like, there's something that they look for in their fiction,
right?
Well, it's characters. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and my series, I threw the kitchen sink. It's everything. It's a little of column A, it's a little of column B. I put in all of my favorite things from Studio Ghibli films, Nausicaa, Lapida. I put. I'm a big fan of the Patrick O'Brien, the Aubrey Maturin series, which is historical, not fantasy or sci-fi, but like all Sherlock Holmes, I'm a fan of. Like, so I basically just picked, a bunch of things and tossed it into my book. And I said, well, these things generally don't coexist well together, but I'm going to make it work. So that's my book.
So if you like character-driven stories, have you read the Sharpe's Rifles, the Sharpe series by Bernard Cornwell?
No, but it's been recommended to me and it's on my list. I've gone through Forrester and I've gone through O'Brien, and I'm aware of and I want to read those. I did see one of the movies back in the day with what's his name? The guy from Game of Thrones, for the first season. He was in Lord of the Rings too. His name is not coming to me at the moment, but he was in that, and I did enjoy that a lot. So I will definitely be looking at that.
I'm trying to think who that actor was.
Yeah,
I know that.
I'm drawing a blank. I can see him. He was also in The Martian. He was the NASA director, and not director, but the mission director in The Martian. But I'm drawing a blank. It'll come to me.
Yeah, generally that kind of happens when the episode is over. That's when the things come to you.
Yep.
I'm trying to think. Oh man, it's gonna bug me too.
It is. Yeah, I know. I'm gonna look it up.
Sean Bean.
Yeah. I kept coming up with Orson Bean. I'm like, it's definitely not Orson Bean. I know that guy. It's Sean Bean. Yeah, you are correct.
And he is this is one of the few series where he doesn't die.
Right. Exactly.
It's just very character driven, which I liked. It stirred up some controversy in the historical living history, historical reenactment, historical in general community, because they have them doing this method of reloading where they do the tap load. And they're like, you couldn't do this. This doesn't work. And then they actually had some period reenactors do it, taking appropriate precautions.
Okay.
I mean, it's definitely not ideal and not the most efficient, but I did like that they sort of stuck it to all the snobbies that are like, well, actually, in a pinch, it does work.
Okay. That's cool. I like that.
So it's one of the things I noticed as obviously I'm a classically trained historian. That's what my degree was in. And so sometimes like we know dates, we know times, we know names. We don't always know the day-to-day stuff because that's the stuff they just assume you know and they don't write down. And so sometimes we do have to guess. Just, that's why the movement to do like living history where they actually live the period. So they live in like there's a famous Bronze Age one in Scotland right now where they're living in that village full time, like they would have to sort of learn what that's like by doing. Yes. And so it always amuses me when people that have never left a classroom say, no, this definitely would never work. And then people that actually put their hands in the dirt, I'm like, well, actually.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So getting back on track, because I get sidetracked anytime history comes up. I can't help myself.
Very cool.
Speaking of history, one of the crying shames of growing older is people stop asking this question. So we are going to bring it back. Are you ready, sir?
I am ready. Bring it on.
So what is your favorite dinosaur?
Favorite dinosaur? Let's go with the Triceratops. There was a great kids book when I was growing up that had this Triceratops. I think his name was Mr. Beasley. I don't remember the name of the book. Maybe it was Mr. Beasley. I don't know. It was basically this kid who's got this dragon egg. It hatched into a Triceratops, and I think I've just been a fan of the Triceratops ever since.
Yeah. It was also one of those in the Land Before Time, if you're old enough to remember that cartoon.
Oh, I'm more than old enough. I was working in movie theaters when that thing came out.
Okay. I watched that one as a kid, and I just remember like being like all of the dinosaurs that were in that movie suddenly were every kid's favorite for a spell.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so now that we've got that out of the way, we are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. We here at the Blasters and Blades podcast are civilized human beings, so we have to ask you this: coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Tea, iced. I actually can't do hot drinks. I can't. I struggle with hot drinks. So I'm pretty much just an iced tea guy.
Is it that you don't like the sensory stuff, or is it just
no? I never developed a taste for coffee, but I was a hot tea and a hot cocoa drinker for a while. But just as you get older, certain things stop working as well as they used to, and so just my esophagus gets kind of burned by hot drinks. It's very, very sensitive, so I can't do it anymore. But iced tea all day.
Is it? Do you do sweet black iced tea, Southern style? Or are you doing herbal teas?
I was a Earl Grey, straight up, and then I also and then I eventually switched over to green tea for a long time. When I was having hot tea, or as a after dinner, coffee, tea, whatever, like I would ask, and they would, if they had a green tea. So I did that for a long time, but I can't do it anymore.
No, for your iced tea, because you can make anything.
Oh, I don't know. It's not sweetened. I'm sorry. No, not sweetened. It's just straight up. Just as a matter of fact, however they do it, the bottled Pure Leaf, Lipton, whatever I guess it's Pure Leaf now, not Lipton anymore. Just dated myself again. The regular, just the unsweetened black tea. That's what I like.
Okay, that works. Do you like a good sun tea then, since you live out on the West Coast where you have the sun to make it work better?
I mean, yeah, my wife used to make it a lot. That was like her thing growing up, was sun tea, and so she used to make it. But now I think we're just too lazy. Now I just think we just buy it.
Life happens. I get it.
I wait. Yeah.
Definitely take some forward planning, and I don't always your desire for beverages doesn't always match your forward planning.
Yeah.
So how did you first fall in love with the genre of speculative fiction?
Well, it kind of is day and date with my love of reading generally. I mean, aside from the early days reading, Hardy Boys and that kind of thing. The first book I ever bought myself at a book fair in middle school was Arthur C. Clarke's Dolphin Island. It just looked interesting, had kind of a cool vibe with the cover, and I bought that at, like one of those Scholastic type deals, and I bought it, and I just fell in love with the idea of it, and I became a devoted, I went from Arthur C. Clarke to Asimov, and then Heinlein, and I just as middle school and then high school went on, I was very much a sci-fi guy, and then sort of Shannara. Well, I ended up in the science fiction fantasy book club, for any of you who are old enough to remember that ridiculous thing. So I was in that club for a long time, and I started getting all sorts of books, mostly sci-fi, but Sword of Shannara was like one of the first fantasy books that I bought and read, and Lord of the Rings, obviously. So yeah, I just been reading it almost not exclusively, because I also like history and detective fiction and things, but that's been my main love since I was a kid.
So did you watch the movie adaptation of Sword of Shannara series that they did?
I tried. I really tried. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, and I was like, I don't remember it being like this. I really gave it my best shot, but I just didn't like it. I thought it was a total whiff.
I really dug it, but I will say I didn't realize until I watched the show, and then I went back and reread it, that the world that was Shannara was like a post-apocalyptic, so that there would have been remnants of earlier society, it, because it was so subtly done that you don't even really think about it, because you just think, oh, I'm reading high fantasy kind of thing, right?
Yes.
And then when you go back and look after I saw that, I'm like, is that right? And I went and reread it, and I'm sure enough, it was there. It was just set dressing almost, which I thought was kind of cool that he was so subtle about it.
Right. Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, that was something that I think at the time, being kind of Lord of the Rings focused, I was like, I think I missed it. I don't think I really cued it in on it. To me, it was just a, Dungeons and Dragons type quest, epic fantasy thing, and I didn't really pick up on that part of it back then.
So did you get into any of the David Eddings?
I did. I read. I couldn't, for the life of me, I couldn't tell you what they're about now, but I did read. I think I actually still have them somewhere, the original paperbacks, because that ended up becoming the thing. Everybody in my family was like, get them gift cards to well, it wouldn't have been Barnes and Nobles. It would have been like Walden Books or B. Dalton or something. But yeah, I got gift cards every year, gift certificates. And so I would just go and load up, and I definitely there were a lot of them, right? I'm trying to think whether I got maybe like the first 3 or 5 or something. I don't really remember. I remember there being a lot of them, and loaded up.
Eddings did the Belgariad and the Belgarion series, which were really good. I enjoyed that one, especially since you get to grow up with the with the protagonist. So he kind of grows up in the page in front of you, which was kind of cool to see that life go full circle. It was actually one of the first chapter books, like proper grown-up books I read.
Right. Yeah.
So it was a good one.
It was definitely I don't think I read the other one, the second one you mentioned, Belgarian, but
that was the 2 series. He had 2 series.
The first series was the one that I read.
Yeah, I read both of the series. So I had the paperback. I read them so much that the books fell apart. Wow. It's one of those, there are certain books you just want to buy in hardback just so you can have them in your library.
Yeah.
But I do most of my reading either through audiobooks or ebooks now, just because it's easier on the eyeballs. But yeah, those are some really good ones. Have you caught any of the modern fantasy that's out there, or are you sticking with the classics?
Well, I've been working on this book for so long, and one of the things about me is I don't like to read a lot when I'm drafting, because I can become kind of a mimic if I'm not careful. I can start mimicking other people's styles, and So I have to be kind of careful what I read while I'm drafting. And I was working on this book for almost 8 years. And so I just really didn't read much during this time. Like I brought my influences into the process and then kind of left it there. I picked up the odd book on occasion, but I didn't read a lot. So I am definitely not up on a lot. Like I said, The Lies of Locke Lamora was like and that's even goes all the way back to like, I don't even know when, 2006, 2007, something like that. So I am definitely not keeping up.
Yeah, I've been. I found the because I limit my TV consumption because I tend to binge if I'm not careful, and before you know it, you're up all night, and you still got to get up and get the kid on the bus and all the things.
For sure.
But I really liked the Shadow and Bones TV series, which is based on the books by Lee Bardugo, I think.
Yeah, that's on my Netflix wish list or whatever. Yeah, that's one of them that I really wanted to check out.
But yeah, that's based on the Six of Crows and the Shadow and Bone trilogy set in the Grishaverse. I don't know how you say that.
Right.
But yeah, it just looked really good. And I found that one through the TV show. But see, I don't hold a book against the TV show against a book or vice versa. Like I let them each stand on their own sort of 2 feet. But then if I like one, I generally go check out the other just to expand. But I can treat them in my head as separate properties.
Yeah.
And there's an interview. Are you familiar with the one? Oh, is it the 100 that was the sci-fi one set on a?
Was that the one with the plane? It's like the passengers on a plane or something like that, and they all come back from somewhere and.
No, the 100 is it starts off on it's a post-apoc one, like years after nuclear war destroyed Earth. Everyone's living in floating, what do you call it? Habitats or whatever, satellites. And at a certain point in time, they have to go check and see if Earth is survivable because the habitats are falling apart. So they send the 100 kids, hence the name. It's based on a book series by, I'm drawing a blank. But I remember they interviewed the author, and I'll link to 100 so you guys can figure it out. But they did an interview with the author when the TV series was coming out, and she said basically they paid her enough money that she sold them the rights, and she likes what they did, but it isn't her book. Their story is different than her story, so you should enjoy them because there's overlap, but they're not the same story. And I thought that was a pretty healthy way to approach the difference between books and movies and.
Yeah, well, I mean, coming from the screenplay writing world and having been paid to adapt books myself, I know how challenging it is. I understand the limitations of the medium, and so I've always been very forgiving of adaptations. And the hair on fire people talking about changes this, changes that, and I look at it and I go, yeah, I can see it. I know why they changed it. It wasn't going to work or whatever. And so I've always been very sympathetic to people who are trying to adapt books to screen.
Yeah, it was by Cass Morgan. There we go. Sometimes my memory ain't what it used to be, But yeah, her books were good. I read the books, and then the movie TV version was a lot different. They went in a different angle. Just, the current cultural zeitgeist changed. What's in vogue ebbs and flows. It's one of those things where the adaptation. Now, did you actually write anything that we would recognize as far as adapting?
Well, nothing that ever got made, but you would recognize. I got paid to adapt the book Pirates of Venus by Edgar Rice Burroughs back in the early 2000s. Around the time that John Carter, like before John Carter came out, when they adapted John Carter of Mars, Pirates of Venus is like Edgar Rice Burroughs' one of his other franchise, obviously besides Tarzan. I mean, I get that, but it's like Pirates of Venus is like John Carter's younger brother or cousin or something. So they paid me to adapt that one, but I've also adapted. With a writing partner of mine, we adapted Captain Blood by Raphael Sabatini, which has been done as a movie, but not since 1935, and we felt it was due for an update. So We did that one too. So I've done it a couple times.
So the John Carter of Mars, that is one of the ones that I felt like the movie was good, but it didn't get the credit it deserves, partly because it was mishandled, I think, by the movie theater. Like, it didn't tell people that that's what it was. It didn't link itself clearly enough, and so they missed their target audience. I mean, I thought it was okay for an adaptation. I just don't think they marketed it in a way that allowed it to be successful.
I agree. I thought it was good. I thought they made a good faith effort, and I thought what they had accomplished. I mean, obviously the guy, what was it, Andrew Stanton or somebody associated with Pixar, made that through Disney, and I appreciated it for what it was. I thought it was funny at the time. The reviews, everybody kind of up in arms about how derivative it was. People go, "Oh, it's Star Wars this and that." I'm like, well, where do you think George Lucas got Star Wars? This book has been around since the 20s or the teens or whenever he wrote the first one. So it's like it is the thing that kind of started science fiction. It's the granddaddy. So yeah, it's going to seem derivative because so many works have been based on it ever since.
When we did our old format, one of the things we would do is we would look at the good reviews and the bad reviews with an author and like kind of see what underlying themes there were, what they liked, what they didn't like.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't as easy for authors to interpret that. It got a little, sometimes people would get their feelings hurt, and not like in a bad way. We were never unkind. But one of the things I noticed when looking through it is two things. One, you can have the same fact. We'll say too much cussing. You'll get people that give it 5 stars because they cussed just enough for the soldiers in this book. And then other people give it 1 star for the same dang reason.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing I noticed by checking dates is people, when people say derivative, they don't mean they literally stole it from this. What they mean is this thing is like that thing, but I found this thing first. Because when you take it in that regard, like, you realize, like, sometimes what they're calling derivative, the other thing they copied, actually was first. Right. Or they were published within months of each other. Like, there's no way he read that and wrote that novel and published it to that degree, right? That fast.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've even heard the same thing said about the new Dune films, and it's just like, guys, the books came out in the 60s. They beat Star Wars, by a dozen years or more. So you can't. You don't want to hang your hat on that as a critique. There's ways to critique that movie, I think, but with you don't want to say, oh, it's it's Star Wars or it's this or it's that. And you're just like, no, that's not what it is. But
it reminds me of all those memes where you see the kids these days, right? And they'll be like, oh, this is the first time we've had X female captain or whatever. And then all the old nerds are like, well, actually, and they're like listing hundreds of examples.
Here's Sonny. Yeah, exactly.
Like when you see that a lot when people talk about strong female characters, and then they're like Alex or the Ripley, the Stargate ladies, Ripley was Aliens. There's just so many of them, right? Like I'm drawing a blank.
Well, I mean, James Cameron did it a lot. I mean, obviously, Linda Hamilton's character in the Terminator films.
Yes, Sarah Connor.
Yeah, Sarah Connor. So Sarah Connor was pretty prototypical as far as that went. So it has been around.
And that's what, like, we all do it, right? The first time you find it, it's the first time ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember telling my mom when I was a kid that this new thing that just came out, the Alvin and the Chipmunks, turned out she had watched it when she was a kid too.
Right.
So it's just like one of those things. It's not that it's new, it's just new to you.
Yes. Right.
All right, well, before we dive into the books that brought us here, we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man. And then when we come back, we're going to dive into your book.
Okay,
so
cool.
And with that, we are going to play the commercial.
Grab your swords and get ready to level up. When gaming journalist Ray experiences a tragic accident with the next generation of gaming consoles, he finds himself stuck in the mystical land of Valka. Trapped in a world filled with magic beasts, warring factions, filthy bandits, and a level system that's out of this world. The only problem is, his only way out may be through. Ray must fight like his life depends on it, because it just may. Survival means victory, and defeat could mean the end. forever. Legends Online Genesis releases on Audible January 7th. Digital and hard copies now available on Amazon.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude, dear listener, dear viewer. All right. So we brought you here to talk about your book. Let me show that beautiful cover. The Treachery of Ravens.
I know that book.
So, yeah. So first off, let's talk about this cover. Like, what's the story of this art?
So I got very lucky. Going into the fantasy genre, you got to come out strong. It's a fiercely competitive market for eyeballs, and getting a good cover was very important to me. I initially went down the road of like commissioning like an artist to do like a real, badass piece of art. And I don't know, I'm not an art director. I don't know what makes a good cover. And the artists that I was talking to, it's like, they weren't sure either. So I was like, I'm going to go with experience. And so I actually, my writing group, my read and critique group, a number of them are published authors, and they all use the same company, an outfit out of New Zealand called Demonza. The guy who runs it is Damon Freeman. It's just a company that specializes in publishing services, mostly to do with book covers. And so it's funny. I had found, I did the whole Pinterest crawl and looking at all these covers, trying to get some ideas, found this cover that really resonated with me. And when I looked up the artist about who did it, it was a Demonza cover. And I'm like, done, sold. So I contacted them, filled out their form, and they assigned me a graphic artist who, based on the information that I gave them about the book, that's the cover roughly. We did some changes, but that's pretty much the cover I got.
It's good. It definitely has, because we talked about it earlier, but it did remind me a little bit of the vibe that you get from the art you see from like the posters for the Shadow and Bones.
Yeah.
So
yep.
I'm digging it. I like it. So if we're going to use the movie theaters, because that's a rating system everyone's familiar with, what would you rate this as far as like, would parents let their kids watch it kind of, or read it kind of thing?
I'm going to go, oh man, that's tough. It's definitely either a really hard PG-13 or a softer R, I would say. There's a good deal of violence in it. If I were making it as a movie, you could interpret some things in such a way that you don't show as much blood, or you could go harder if you wanted. There is enough in there that I felt compelled to do a content warning at the beginning of the book, just because of some themes that, might be upsetting to some readers. So,
right.
So it's in there. You do have to be cautious. So I'm going to say soft R, just to give you a final answer.
Okay. So what was the origin for this universe, the premise that sort of launched this series? How'd you come up with the idea?
Well, it's a bit of a journey. So a friend of mine was a D&D player, and she asked me to come up with an origin story, short story for her rogue character in a D&D campaign that she was doing. And I sat down and started working on it, and things happened, never finished it, went into my files, and it became one of those, I call it a Christmas tree. I just would like hang new ideas on it over time until it kind of grew and grew. And so by the time the opportunity to walk away from my work in the film business and actually work on a personal project came along, I had the basics of this story kind of in my head. And it was, a female thief. I had the character, Alice, the magical girl, if you will, trope in the story. She was there by then. The detective, Michelle Auberjohn, came along later. But that's kind of where the story originated.
Which ones are on the cover that we're looking at? Are they any specific characters, or are they just more
so top center, that's Meryl Gaspard. She's let's say she's the lead. 16 years old. She's a kind of kind of a socialite by day. She's the daughter of a well-respected brothel saloon owner in the city of Peltz. But she's a thief by night. And she's a thief because she doesn't want what her mother wants for her, which is to take over the family business. She doesn't want anything to do with the brothel or the salon or entertaining rich people or any of that stuff. She wants to strike out on her own. And so she, as a youngster, she kind of ran on the streets with kind of the urchins of the city and ended up kind of picking pockets and gradually worked her way up to more advanced forms of burglary and became a very accomplished thief. So by the time you meet her in the book at 16, she's a very accomplished thief working on her own. The lower left is the acolyte in the Aeronaut and Acolyte series. Meryl is the aeronaut, if the goggles didn't give it away. But Alice is she is a young cleric learning healing in a hospital in the city of Peltz. She is a magic user called a Whisper. That even though magic has been outlawed in this country of Acastria, they are secretly using magic for its ability to heal. And so she is being trained as a doctor. She's 15. She's being trained as a doctor to use her magic to perform healing on people. And then on the right, that's Michel Auberjohn. He's late 30s, around 40. He's kind of he is a inspector in the police constabulary in the city of Peltz. His career is not going great. He's a very honest man in a very corrupt world, so he is kind of giving up. But he does have this one case looking for this brilliant thief that's been turning the city upside down, and so he is, unbeknownst to Meryl, he is the one who is in pursuit of Meryl and her thieving ways.
So why did you go with the Plague Doctor mask, or is that just for artistic license?
I would say that's kind of just an iconic look. I mean, it does serve a purpose in the story. When she is working with people who are not staff at the hospital, she wears a mask to hide her identity and the fact that she is just a kid. There are story reasons why kids only or young people only are being trained in this use of whisper magic, but it's basically just to hide her identity from people who are not in the know.
Okay. Were there any secondary characters that were especially memorable to you?
Yeah, I mean the ones that would obviously Meryl's mother, Alcinda, very strong woman, real tough customer. She ended up being one of my favorite characters to write. I had originally kind of drawn her up as this kind of wicked stepmother villain. And then when she started talking, because I always assign actors' voices to the characters when I'm doing dialogue, and when I started writing her dialogue and I heard Jennifer Saunders' voice, I immediately knew who this woman was, and she wasn't as much of a villain, or at least, she was one of Meryl's antagonists, but she wasn't the villain that I had originally designed her to be. I felt much more sympathetic to her, so it really changed, and she became a much more dynamic character as a result. One of the other villains in the piece is Jonah Gulliver. He is the head of a gang that Meryl used to run with, and she's fallen out with, and so they are mortal enemies. So he hunts her through the streets. Alice has a guard who is very sympathetic to her plight, and they are friends. Marcello Cano, he is a young chevalier, basically one of her bodyguards that follows her around everywhere she goes and is one of her allies, and then he has a sister Britta who was a lot of fun. So yeah, and then Meryl also has what do I want to say? Mentor, I guess, if you will. He's a mechanist with a very unoriginal nickname, Tinker. It's not his full name, but that's what he goes by. And he is a mechanist. He designs a lot of the machina in the steampunk type machina that appears in the story.
I mean, as far as nicknames go, sometimes they're like that.
Yes.
We had a guy from Texas, and sure enough, in my Army unit, we called him Tex because we were creative, right?
Right.
See? It happens that way.
Yep. On the nose.
So what about the antagonist? Obviously, you don't want to give any spoilers, but what can you tell us about the bad guys, the antagonist for your cast of characters?
Sure. So there's 3 main POVs, obviously the characters on the cover, and they're designed in a way that each of these POV characters was given a nemesis, a villain in the story. So each of them has someone that they're contending with. For Meryl, it's primarily Jonah Gulliver. Also, Michelle Auberjohn is someone, obviously, he's a police officer who's hunting her, wants to arrest her. So the police are looking for her. In Alice's case, she has a supervisor named Emil Sabathier, who is a doctor who is charged with her education. He's a strict taskmaster, very unforgiving, makes her life a living hell. So she has him to contend with. And then Michelle has his boss, a man named Arlon Foudreau, who is the deputy chief inspector of the Peltz Metropolitan Constabulary, and he is as corrupt as anyone in the city. And he is they were friends in college, and now as police officers together, Arlon Foudreau has risen in the ranks where Michelle has not, and Arlon is basically trying to drag Michelle into his graft, into his corrupt world in a way that's hard on Michelle's soul. And so each of the 3 POV characters have these nemeses that they have to contend with.
Okay. So you mentioned the magic girl trope. So what did you specifically lean into any of the tropes in this book, or did that just more by happenstance that they occurred?
Yeah, it was a little bit by happenstance, only on account of my ignorance. Like I told you before, I haven't been reading a lot in recent years, and it didn't really occur to me how much I didn't know until I was trying to market this book and getting on Twitter and immersing myself in the book blogger world and the social media sphere, realizing that you hear all these lists of tropes and genres that people are using as kind of a shopping list of things to attract readers to their books. And I was like, God, do I have any of that? And if I did any tropes, I stumbled into them by accident. The obvious one would be Alice, the magical girl. As for the rest of them, I probably would have to leave that to people who know better than me, because that's a very difficult. I arrived at, if there are tropes in the book, I arrived at them honestly, because I really was kind of ignorant of how that all worked.
I mean, tropes exist for a reason. They exist because they work and they're popular, and they work because they're popular. So I don't know that you could. I would not be surprised if someone went on TV tropes and they could find tropes in various books, whether the author knew those tropes existed or not.
Absolutely.
It's just, they exist just like stereotypes exist because at some level there's a core underlying truth.
There's a reality there. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't mean it's true all the time for everybody, but and it doesn't even mean it's current, but it started from somewhere. And I think tropes are sort of like that. All right.
I think we carry them around. I mean, it's how you train an artist. You train an artist by, reading and watching and absorbing story and characters over many, many years until you have this catalog in your head. And then these kind of hybrid versions of these things come out, and there's going to be connections to things that have gone before. It's just inevitable. And so, yeah, the tropes are just, I think, are just very naturally occurring.
So what role, because it's on the cover, what role does the airship play in the story?
So airships play a big role. So if you notice the badge on the cover that says the Aeronaut and the Acolyte series, Meryl is the aeronaut, and her first great love is airships, specifically airships of all sizes. In this story, and I use the term airship, they are not lighter than air. They are not dirigibles or blimps with gas inside them, gas bags. These are heavy iron, steel contraptions that are lifted by, and I'll leave it to people to read the book if you want to know the pseudoscience behind it that I made up for it. But these are massive craft that I hope would make Hayao Miyazaki proud. So these are big things, warships, freighters, transports of all kinds, luxury cruise liners. And they, she lives in a city of pelts where they are a major trade hub. And so massive cargo airships come and go all the time. And she's just had this fascination with them since she was a little girl. And when she is of a certain age and meets Tinker, she is given the opportunity to fly herself a small craft called the Raven. And it's the realization of a dream for her to fly. And so airships play a very big part, not just in this first book, but in the books to follow. Matter of fact, they play an even bigger role in the book that I'm working on now. And they will continue to be major players in the series going forward.
So what does that series look like? Is it going to be a trilogy? Is it going to be like an ongoing series? What do you envision for this world?
It's planned as 9 books, basically 3 trilogies with 3 timelines separated by a few years between each trilogy, or at least a couple of years between each trilogy. So the next one, the one I'm working on now, follows this one like almost right after this book ends, within a day or two. And then the third book will do the same. It will follow after the very end. And then that will kind of end this part of the story. And then we will be jumping ahead a year or more to then cover what comes in the second trilogy, which has its own emphasis and story and character developments, and then culminating in a third trilogy.
Okay. Do you have a timeline? I don't know, what your writing process looks like, but I mean,
that is the question. So I took 8 years to write the first one. My plan at the moment, and my work ethic is very suspect, so take this with a grain of salt, but my plan is to finish the first draft of the second book by the end of this year, with an eye towards knowing now how long it takes to edit and copy edit and get a book ready for publication. Probably by the beginning of next summer is when I would like to have the second one out. Then focus, because I actually now know the story. Like when I started the first book, I had an idea. I kind of knew what I wanted. But, the first 2 years, like almost none of that writing survived, because I was, starting and stopping and like, nope, that's not it. Nope, that doesn't stick. Like I threw out probably 50,000 words of the first 2 years. And then it took another 2 or 3 to finally get a first draft. And then another couple of years to edit and then polish and so forth. So the first one took a long time, but the second one, I was just working on it the other day, and I have it a very detailed outline that I'm working from for the next 2 books. So I'm hopeful, because I can write fast when I'm motivated. So I'm hopeful that I will be able to stick to that timeline and have the second book out next year and the third book out the year after.
Okay. And, maybe the good idea fairy will pop you on the head and you'll pick up your speed.
For sure.
So like, this is not a how to be a writer podcast. Like there's, God knows there's plenty of people more successful than me writing faster and better.
And me.
But when you write, are you the kind of guy that like lets your muse talk to you? Do you, keep in mind you're answering obviously for readers and listeners, not other authors.
Yeah, of course.
Like, what's the process?
My process. So I do outline. I like I said, when I started in the official start date that I always cite is January of 2017, when I kind of officially started drafting this book. But when I started, I had a very kind of loose idea, and I just kind of made inroads, stopped, didn't work, do another one. But eventually I got far enough in that I was like, okay, I can kind of see where this is going. And then I outlined the whole thing, and then things moved forward pretty quickly. My discovery writing, the muse, tends to be chapter to chapter. I do allow myself enough room for surprises. I tend to create bullet lists of things that I want to happen in the scene based on how I want the beats to go. And then I'll kind of jump from bullet point to bullet point, filling in with prose in between. And then sometimes something will happen in that creation of the prose, and I'll go, oh, I like where this is going better. And then the beat map can go right out the window. And now I'm making it up as I go. So I do leave myself room to discover, but kind of felt like I needed to get a little bit, kind of up my game a little bit, get a little bit more. And I don't mean this as a shade on Pantsers. For me, I felt like I needed to be more professional and accountable to myself, and I needed to have an outline. And it sounds like shade to Pantsers, and it is not. I totally respect that if that's your way, but I needed to hold myself more accountable.
Okay. So if your main characters met you in a dark alley and they knew that you were Steven Nickell, the creator of their world, the tormentor of their souls, and they met you in a dark alley, how do you see that interaction playing out?
Oh my God. Michelle would probably punch me in the mouth. Meryl would probably stab me, and Alice would cry, I would say. Not one of them would be happy to see me.
Okay. So what can we expect from the larger world? Like, obviously it's got airships, it's got some level of magic, and the standard thievery kind of adventure story going on, but what about the world itself? What does that look like?
So you have to imagine a kind of, I drew Acastria, the Acastrian Republic, which is the country where this takes place. I drew that very heavily from the French Republic of the Napoleonic War, and the situation that country found itself in historically, and I kind of expanded from there. And so the country is kind of at war, defending itself from actions that it has taken against its noble classes, in the same way that the French Revolution overthrew its noble classes, its peerage. And so it's a war-torn country, very totalitarian, and the I would say, I keep coming back to this word swashbuckling. Even though it's not as swashbuckling in this one, there are sky pirates coming. I'm a huge fan. Obviously, you heard me say I adapted Captain Blood many years ago. My favorite pirate movie, favorite pirate book. I'm a big pirate guy, and I had to have sky pirates in my steampunk novel. It's almost like, chocolate and peanut butter. So it had to be a thing. So it's in there. Ship to ship combat is coming. A lot of sword play and action. People fighting for their lives. I've got, this one isn't that big in scope. It's more the character development. It's setting the table for a lot of things that are coming. so it's me moving the kind of the chess pieces around the board to then move forward into the next books. But obviously the goal was still to make them very compelling personal stories. Their reasons for needing to leave Peltz to go on the road and do other things. So that's kind of the ambition, the goal, the vibe that I want people to take away.
So for weapons, you mentioned swashbuckling. So we're talking swords. Is there going to be guns, magic fireballs? Like what kind of?
Yeah. So there is going to be guns, largely matchlock, flintlock. There's I have this wheel lock, kind of custom wheel lock pistol. That's very heavily steampunked. It's not anything a military veteran such as yourself, you'd be scratching your head going, oh, what's the deal with this? But it's very fantasyized. But there is also, but it all has its basis in it has an analog to our world. So there will be cannons, rifles, but also a lot of swordplay, daggers, rapiers, things of that nature.
Okay. So if you could live in this world, would you want to?
I wouldn't want to live in this country. Like I said, it's very totalitarian. They've been at war a long time. You basically in this country of Acastria, if you don't have an occupation, if you don't have a trade, and you don't have a job, they will find you one, and you won't like what they find for you because they need people growing food, they need people mining raw materials, and they need people in uniforms in the army. And so you are pressed one way or the other. If you don't have, and that's one of the things that you'll find in the book a lot, is people afraid of losing what they call their apprentice certificates, because they're usually apprenticed to a tradesman of one kind or another. And if you don't have that proof that you were learning a trade, you're going to get grabbed up. You're going to get pressed into government service, doing something. And there's no career opportunities there. You're in it for the long haul. So that is not a place I would want to be. So it's one of those places you could live there as long as you have enough plot armor and you're one of the rich people. If you are a shopkeeper or a businessman, or if you have a trade, blacksmith or a mechanist, as Tinker is, or you own your own salon or brothel as Alcinda Gaspard does, and you're fine. You're good to go. But if you are not one of those people and they catch you out on the streets, you're going to end up in some kind of uniform doing something unpleasant. Okay. So this is going to be airing because, obviously we pre-record, dear listener. This is airing at the end of July. So I understand you have a sale coming up in August. So you want to tell us about that? Yeah. So August 1st will be my first sale. It's a countdown deal on Amazon. It's going to be 99 cents. And it's just the first one of its kind. When I set the prices, it's like, tried to work within Amazon's parameters, but I wanted people to have the opportunity to check it out and give me reviews. That's kind of the author's lifeblood. And so, pick it up for 99 cents from the 1st to the 7th of August and drop a review, because I'd love to hear what people think. Okay. So how long is this book? It's 612 pages, 174,000 words. It's a bit of a chonker. Okay, so that paperback could kill somebody. You can hurt somebody with it, or keep a door open. Absolutely. So are all of them going to be about that long? I don't know what the standards are in steampunk. When I was reading steampunk novels, they were like novellas was the rage. Yeah, well, it's 3 POVs, and it's going to be 3 POVs at least for the foreseeable future. So if you imagine, it's essentially 3 main characters worth of story in each one. So I'm based on the outlines that I have for the second and the third book, I'm assuming as long. If not, I'm going to try to keep them from going much longer. You look at that final page count, and you're like, ugh. but it is what it is, and I'm anticipating that they will be about as long. Yeah.
Okay. And if people wanted to check you out on the wild interwebs, how could they find you? And as usual, dear listener, we're linking to all of that below.
I am at www.stevendnickell.com, and I am on Twitter at angrybee411, and I am on Instagram as at SDNauthor, and I'm Steven D Nickell on Facebook.
Oh, I can't believe we forgot to ask this. So before we wrap this up, because this is, you mentioned some of the fantasy elements that are there, does this have like elves, dwarves, that sort of thing, or is it just plain humans?
No fantasy races. I'm really kind of, and I apologize to any high fantasy fans out there. I'm just kind of up to here with fantasy races. I really just wanted to focus on, people, and obviously those characters are also people, but I just wanted to focus on a human-centric story.
Nothing wrong with that. I just figured I would ask, because when you mentioned some of the magic elements, I'm like, oh, well, let me check.
Yeah.
Do you get, a lot of ship culture, like back in the Age of Sails would have sometimes cats on board because keep the mice at bay. So did you take some of those Age of Sail type tropes?
There are going to be some. There hasn't been a whole lot of life aboard yet. There's a few chapters involving the crew of an airship in this one, the airship Bergwind. You do get you get to look at the steam, the mechanic, and the life aboard a little bit, but it'll be a lot more present in the books going forward. And I haven't thought about a ship's cat. It's a great idea though. But there's definitely the food, the bad food, the weevils and the biscuits and all that kind of stuff. That's definitely going to be in the next one.
So the trick to writing anything like that, where you're talking about government organizations, just to remember military grade or government grade, it's generally the cheapest crap made by the lowest bidder, but it's still overpriced.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. So, and it's all has its place and its purpose. It's not like it's done to be mean. It is what it is,
I remember somebody tried to sell me something by telling me it was military grade. I'm like, wait, you don't want me to buy it?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
All right. So clearly this interview is winding down, but was there anything we didn't ask you about the treachery of ravens that you think the audience needs to know before you wrap this up?
Oh, God, you got me there. Is there anything I want them to know? I guess we kind of covered it. I guess the main thing I would say is it's going to be hard. Like if you're one of those people who's kind of looking for a checklist of things, you might be a little frustrated because I didn't follow a lot of the rules or genre specific things. It's really kind of loose, and I kind of went my own way. And I guess what I'm hoping is that people just hear that and give it a shot, and hopefully you kind of see it my way, that there's other ways of doing the genre stuff without having to slavishly adhere to the rules. So that's what I would say.
Okay. So this is the part, dear listener, where we remind you to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books, people, and it really does make a difference, especially with debut authors and new novels. Those reviews help tweak the algorithms to tell them to recommend this book to other people. So help a brother out and leave a review, share it with your friends, buy a copy for yourself, buy a copy for those friends, if you have friends, whatever, however this works, help a man out.
Yes,
and
please.
you can find us on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, our TikTok, our Twitter, our email, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only, people. We have our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have Madam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitter, and email. And finally, we have our website, which is so junky now that Spotify bought out Anchor FM. Just click the Linktree, people. It makes your life a lot easier. But when you get there, you can support the show for as little as 99 cents a month. You can help keep the lights on. We really do appreciate your patronage. Or you could support the show more directly by going to buymeacoffee.com/ author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that it's for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink until the coffee brand coffee pours out of their eyeballs, people, and we will film it for your enjoyment. Speaking of coffee brand coffee, links will be in the show notes. Discount code PODCASTGRUNTS gets you 10% off your purchases. You win, you get good coffee, we get a kickback. It's a win-win, people, and you help keep the lights on. So with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my absentee and crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. All right, thank you for sticking with us and for coming on the show.
Thanks, JR. I really appreciate it.
And we'll be doing another panel on Gas Lamp, Diesel Punk, all the niche steampunk sort of offshoots. So I'll have to have you come back for that one too.
I would love it. Thanks.
All right. And with that, I'm going to hit the end button.